The Indian subcontinent, a land of ancient civilizations, diverse cultures, and immense wealth, was forever changed by the arrival of British imperialism. For nearly 2 centuries, the British East India Company and later the British Crown ruled over the region, leaving an indelible mark that continues to shape the destinies of modern-day India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. This is the story of how British imperialism systematically dismantled the social, economic, and political fabric of one of the world's oldest and most prosperous civilizations. Before the arrival of the British, the Indian subcontinent was home to a thriving civilization with a rich history dating back thousands of years. The region boasted advanced systems of agriculture, trade, and craftsmanship. It was known for its textiles, spices, and precious gems, which had long been coveted by foreign traders. The Mughal Empire, which ruled much of the subcontinent from the 16th to the 19th century, had established a sophisticated administrative system and fostered a period of cultural and artistic flourishing. The economy of pre-colonial India was diverse and self-sufficient. Villages were largely autonomous, with intricate systems of local governance and resource management. Textile production, in particular, was a cornerstone of the Indian economy, with highly skilled artisans producing fine cottons and silks that were sought after around the world. India's share of the global economy stood at about 23% in 1750, a testament to its economic prowess. The arrival of European trading companies in the 17th century marked the beginning of a new era for the Indian subcontinent. Among these, the British East India Company would prove to be the most consequential. Initially established for trade, the company gradually expanded its influence through a combination of military conquests, strategic alliances, and economic manipulation. The Battle of Plassey in 1757 is often considered the starting point of British rule in India. This pivotal event saw the East India Company defeat the Nawab of Bengal, effectively giving the British control over a vast and wealthy region. From this foothold, the company expanded its territories and influence across the subcontinent over the next 100 years. The company's rule was characterized by ruthless economic exploitation. One of the most devastating policies was the systematic destruction of India's textile industry. British manufacturers, unable to compete with the quality and affordability of Indian textiles, lobbied for protectionist measures. The company obliged by imposing heavy duties on Indian textiles exported to Britain while flooding the Indian market with cheap, machine-made British goods. This deliberate deindustrialization had catastrophic effects on Indian artisans and weavers. Millions were left unemployed, forced to return to subsistence agriculture or migrate to overcrowded cities. The destruction of India's manufacturing base would have long-lasting consequences, stunting the country's industrial development for generations to come. Agriculture, too, was reshaped to serve British interests. The company introduced new land revenue systems that disrupted traditional farming practices. The permanent settlement in Bengal, for instance, created a class of landlords loyal to the British, while impoverishing millions of peasants. Cash crops like indigo, cotton, and opium were promoted at the expense of food crops, leading to frequent famines. One of the most notorious examples of British economic exploitation was the opium trade. The company cultivated opium in India and smuggled it into China, creating a lucrative trade that enriched British coffers while devastating Chinese society. This illicit trade would eventually lead to the Opium Wars, further expanding British imperial influence in Asia. The drain of wealth from India to Britain was enormous and sustained. Economic historian Utsa Patnaik has estimated that Britain drained nearly $45 trillion from India during the period of its colonial rule. This transfer of wealth fueled Britain's industrial revolution and global dominance while leaving India impoverished. Beyond economic exploitation, British imperialism had profound social and cultural impacts on the Indian subcontinent. The introduction of English education and Western concepts of governance, while providing some benefits, also served to undermine traditional Indian systems of knowledge and social organization. The British implemented policies of divide and rule, exacerbating existing social and religious divisions. They codified and rigidified the caste system, turning what had been a somewhat fluid social hierarchy into a rigid, legally enforced structure. This not only deepened social inequalities, but also created new tensions that would have lasting consequences. Religious identities were also manipulated for political gain. The British emphasized and sometimes invented differences between Hindus and Muslims, fostering a sense of separate communal identities that had not previously existed to the same degree. This policy of divide and rule would ultimately contribute to the partition of India and the creation of Pakistan. The imposition of British cultural norms and values led to what has been termed colonial modernity, a hybrid culture that was neither fully Indian nor fully British. While this cultural exchange brought some positive developments, it also resulted in a sense of cultural alienation among many Indians, particularly the educated elite. The British also reshaped India's physical landscape. They built railways, primarily to facilitate the extraction of resources and the movement of troops, but which also had the effect of connecting distant parts of the subcontinent. They established new cities and reshaped existing ones along European lines. While these infrastructural developments had some benefits, they were primarily designed to serve imperial interests rather than the needs of the Indian population. The political consequences of British imperialism were far-reaching and continue to shape the region today. The British dismantled existing political structures and replaced them with a centralized colonial administration. This new system, while efficient for resource extraction and control, was fundamentally undemocratic and unresponsive to the needs of the Indian people. The Indian Rebellion of 1857, also known as the Sepoy Mutiny, marked a turning point in British rule. The brutal suppression of the rebellion led to the formal dissolution of the East India Company and the establishment of direct crown rule. This period, known as the British Raj, saw the further consolidation of British power and the implementation of policies aimed at preventing future uprisings. As nationalist movements gained strength in the early 20th century, the British responded with a mix of repression and limited reforms. The partition of Bengal in 1905, ostensibly for administrative reasons, was seen by many as an attempt to divide the nationalist movement along religious lines. This move backfired, fueling the Swadeshi movement and strengthening the calls for independence. The First World War saw over 1 million Indian soldiers fighting for the British Empire, with the promise of greater self-governance after the war. However, the post-war period brought disappointment and further repression, culminating in the Jallianwala Bagh massacre in 1919, where British troops fired on unarmed protesters, killing hundreds. The interwar period saw the rise of prominent nationalist leaders like Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru, who mobilized mass movements against British rule. The British responded with a combination of concessions and crackdowns, but the momentum for independence was unstoppable. The Second World War further weakened Britain's hold on India. The war effort strained resources, leading to the Bengal famine of 1943, in which millions died due to British mismanagement and callousness. The war also saw the formation of the Indian National Army, which fought alongside the Japanese against the British, challenging the myth of Indian loyalty to the empire. As independence approached, the British policy of divide and rule bore its most bitter fruit. The demand for a separate Muslim state, fueled by years of British manipulation of communal identities, led to the partition of India in 1947. This division, hastily implemented by the departing British, resulted in one of the largest mass migrations in human history and widespread communal violence that claimed hundreds of thousands of lives. The creation of India and Pakistan as separate nations sowed the seeds for ongoing conflicts, including multiple wars over Kashmir. The arbitrary drawing of borders disregarded ethnic and linguistic realities, leading to further conflicts such as the Bangladesh Liberation War in 1971. The long-term effects of British imperialism on the Indian subcontinent have been profound and lasting. Economically, the region that once accounted for almost a quarter of the world's GDP was left impoverished and deindustrialized. The dismantling of traditional industries and the focus on raw material extraction left India, Pakistan, and later Bangladesh struggling to industrialize in the post-colonial era. The administrative structures left behind by the British, by providing some framework for governance, were ill-suited to the needs of newly independent nations. The centralized, bureaucratic system often proved inefficient and prone to corruption. The legal systems, based on British common law, sometimes conflicted with local traditions and realities. Socially, the legacy of divide and rule policies continues to shape communal relations in the subcontinent. Religious tensions, particularly between Hindus and Muslims, have led to recurring violence and political instability. The rigidification of the caste system under British rule has made social reform more challenging, despite legal prohibitions against caste discrimination. Culturally, the impact of British imperialism is complex and multifaceted. English remains an important language in India, serving as a lingua franca in a linguistically diverse nation and providing some advantages in the global economy. However, this has also led to concerns about the marginalization of indigenous languages and knowledge systems. The education system, modeled on British lines, has produced a highly skilled workforce, but has also been criticized for its emphasis on rote learning and its neglect of vocational skills. The brain drain of highly educated Indians to Western countries, a pattern established during colonial times, continues to impact the region's development. Politically, the borders drawn by the departing British have led to ongoing conflicts. The Kashmir dispute between India and Pakistan remains one of the world's most intractable conflicts, with the potential for nuclear escalation. The creation of Bangladesh in 1971 highlighted the artificial nature of the borders drawn during partition. Environmental degradation, another legacy of colonial exploitation, continues to pose challenges. The British introduction of large-scale monoculture and the exploitation of forests for timber have had lasting impacts on biodiversity and ecological balance. Despite these challenges, it's important to note that the nations of the Indian subcontinent have made significant strides since independence. India has emerged as a major economic power, with a thriving technology sector and a growing middle class. Pakistan, despite political instability, has made progress in various sectors. Bangladesh has achieved remarkable success in social indicators and economic growth. However, the shadow of British imperialism looms large over these achievements. The structural inequalities, communal divisions, and economic distortions introduced during colonial rule continue to shape the trajectories of these nations. The process of overcoming this legacy is ongoing and will likely continue for generations to come. In conclusion, British imperialism in the Indian subcontinent was a system of exploitation that fundamentally altered the region's economic, social, and political landscape. What was once one of the world's most prosperous regions was reduced to poverty and dependency. The British policy of divide and rule sowed seeds of conflict that continue to bear bitter fruit. The arbitrary borders drawn at independence have led to ongoing disputes and instability. Yet the story of the Indian subcontinent is also one of resilience and renewal. Despite the enormous challenges left by colonial rule, the people of India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh have worked to rebuild their nations and reclaim their heritage. As these countries continue to grapple with the legacy of imperialism, they also strive to chart new paths towards development and social justice. The history of British imperialism in the Indian subcontinent serves as a stark reminder of the devastating impact of colonial exploitation. It underscores the importance of understanding historical injustices and their ongoing consequences. As the world grapples with the legacies of colonialism and the challenges of globalization, the experience of the Indian subcontinent offers important lessons about the enduring impacts of imperial domination and the long, difficult process of post-colonial recovery and development.